Hello again. This week we're looking at the parable of the wedding feast. Let's get into it. This parable is found in the book of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. There are several things I want to quickly note. First, this story picks up in the middle of a larger account. It says, again, Jesus spoke to them, meaning he has been speaking to someone already and is continuing his thoughts. Who is he speaking to? We'll look at the context in a minute. Second, the setting of this parable is that of a wedding. I've linked an article in the description that gives some details as to what a wedding in Jesus' time looked like. Give it a read to better prepare for the study. Next, the king has sent some servants to the original invitees, but some of these seized and killed the servants. It's important to note that this is alluding to events in the Old Testament, specifically regarding how many of the Old Testament prophets were treated. The role of prophets ranges from Moses, the very first, all the way to John the Baptist, the forerunner of Christ. The king responds to these original invitees by destroying them and burning their cities. Again, this is another allusion to both things of old and things to come. Many times through the prophets, God promised that Jerusalem will be destroyed, and this occurs in 70 AD. Now we get onto the topic of worthiness. Who is worthy to attend the wedding? The ones who were originally invited are no longer worthy to attend because of their treatment of the king's servants. Shall the king cancel the wedding entirely? No, instead, he sends his remaining servants into the highways and roads to invite and gather anyone that they can find. Importantly, they call both bad people and good people. This shows that one's worthiness to attend the wedding is not meritorious. No guest came to the wedding because they had been so good. Instead, all were invited because of the king's generosity and his grace. Somehow, though, a man was at the wedding without a wedding garment. It's clear then that this man was not invited to the wedding, but somehow entered in his own way. He somehow managed to crash a wedding with an open invite. To put this in perspective, how distracting would it be if you attended a wedding where one person was just wearing casual clothes, or worse, if someone else was wearing white? The purpose of a wedding is to honor and glorify the bride and groom, and this man's lack of a wedding garment is distracting from their special day. Importantly, the man knew that he was trespassing and crashing the wedding because he had no defense when he was confronted. He wasn't there for the bride and groom. Finally, here's the punchline of the parable. For many are called, but few are chosen. This statement reminds me of the parable of the sower found in Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 9. Take a look at that parable to make better sense of this statement. Let's go ahead and look at the preceding context. Starting in Matthew 21, verses 28 through 32, we see Jesus share a simple parable about two sons and a father. The father has asked both sons to complete a task, and one said, "Sure, I'll do it," but he did not. And the other said, "No, I won't do it," but he did. Jesus asked the simple question, which son obeyed his father? The point is simple. Obedience is more than just words, it's actions. Jesus delivers this dire statement to the Pharisees when he says the tax collectors and the prostitutes will go into the kingdom of God before them. Clearly, Jesus is fed up with their pretentious religion that is only in words and never in action. Continuing on into Matthew 21, verses 28 through verses 33 through 46, we have a parable of a man who planted a vineyard and hired laborers to look after it. When the harvest time came, the man sent servants to the vineyard to collect his fruit, but the tenants killed the servants. This happens another time, and eventually the man sends his own son to go and collect his fruit. The tenants see this as an opportunity to seize the inheritance and kill the man's son. This is alluding to the death of the prophets that came before Christ and the crucifixion of Christ soon to come. Jesus again addresses his point. The kingdom of God remains where it is fruitful. It takes a lot of effort on the laborer's part to help the vineyard to bear fruit. And if the vineyard is not bearing fruit, the laborers will be fired and new ones hired. Let's go ahead and look at some core teachings from the wedding feast. Of course, the first core teaching is that which Jesus provides. Many are called, but few are chosen. Again, read Matthew 13, verses 1 through 9 to better understand his sentiment in these words. Next, it is possible to crash an open invite. Though the wedding is an open invite, you must be invited. You cannot enter on your own terms by your own way, and when you enter, there are expectations of decorum placed on you. Now, the good news is that this invitation is offered to everyone, regardless of how good or how bad one has been. Whoever accepts the invitation is given wedding garments and can enter into the feast. Consider these two variations of the parable. One illuminates the gracious hospitality of the king, and the other illuminates his justified vengeance. In the first, the king sent his servants into the highways and roads to invite any and all passers-by. However, he instructed his servants to be very selective in who they invited and gave them a list of criteria to judge off of. Invited guests also had to bring their own wedding garments and show off a cool party trick. If the king wasn't impressed, they'd be thrown out. At the wedding, very little was given to them too, just morsels of bread and a shot of wine per guest. Who would attend this wedding? Would you attend this wedding? What would you think of the host? In the other, the king showed no retribution to the original invitees, and he had no dress code in place. People could show up in tattered clothes or in their own wedding garments, and several showed up in white dresses and suits. Who should the focus of the wedding be on? Who is it on currently? The original invitees, also seeing that they could treat the king's servants as they pleased, showed up as the ceremony was ending, devoured the cake, and treated the king's guests harshly and cruelly. Again, who should the focus of the wedding be on? Who is it on currently? Spend time considering how these variations affect the teaching of the story and the king's character. I only have a couple of cross-references to consider. As mentioned, the parable of the sower, found in Matthew 13, gives more insight to the teaching of this parable. Isaiah 61:10 is a wonderful verse that describes what the wedding garments are. Isaiah describes being clothed in the garments of salvation and covered in the robe of righteousness. He also likens this to a bride and a groom at a wedding in their wonderful outfits. Finally, Revelation 19, verses 6 through 9, points to the wedding to come between Christ and the church. It describes the bride's dress as threaded with the fine linen of her righteous deeds. I've got a few questions that may be good to ask in your study. Pick one or two from each of the categories. To open the conversation, try asking, how do you respond to people who flake on your plans? Can you crash a wedding with an open invite? If you were planning a wedding, who would you invite and who would you not? When was a time that you planned a hangout only for people to flake at the last minute? After you've read the parable once, begin making observations such as, who is the king and his son? Who are the servants? How do the original invitees respond to the invitation? Are there acceptable reasons for missing a wedding? Where would the man have found a wedding garment? Was he expected to bring his own? Did the man knowingly trespass and crash the wedding? Once you've made enough observations, you can interpret the meaning of a story. Consider its settings, the characters and their actions, and the allusions throughout. Try asking, if this is a wedding, who is the bride? Was the king's response to the original invitees justified? What made the original invitees unworthy to attend the wedding? What makes the new invitees worthy to attend? Is the king's response to the man fair or justified? Why or why not? What is the meaning of many are called but few are chosen? Looking to the Old Testament, what historical moments do verses 6 and 7 allude? And what kind of host is the king? Eager to serve or stingy? Hospitable or tyrannical? Finally, apply what you learned to your own experiences in life. Have you accepted the wedding invitation? And if not, why not? How should wedding guests act at a wedding? With gratitude and joy, or by trying to pay back their attendance, which is more respectful to the host? Do you wear the wedding garments given to you, or do you just carry them around? There are three responses to the wedding invitation seen in this parable: indifference, found in verse 5, opposition in verse 6, and acceptance, verse 10. In which category do you lie? So this is just a quick overview for our study on the wedding feast. Thank you for listening.